I have come to the realization, and I know this is going to sound really ridiculous, that we don't know what the hell the pelvic floor is, does. We're taught a lie basically from kids up, and then even in like basic PT school, we didn't learn shit. And here's the thing, I got a lot to learn too, and I've been at this for 25 years. So let me tell you where I'm coming from. I have so many moms, women, just patients period, that come in and they have this idea, and not erroneously because this is what they were taught, that the pelvic floor's only job is to support organs, almost like, and you literally teach people this, like, oh, the pelvic floor is like a hammock that supports your organs. And what people literally think is that your bladder, your rectum, your cervix, and your uterus are literally hanging out on your pelvic floor like a hammock, like just chilling there, and that there's nothing else that contributes to that support. Not so. And so you try and dig deeper, and I've been really lucky that I've had a bunch of cadaver experiences, and you know, I feel like every time you get to look at one, you get a much better sense of how tremendously complex and beautiful and just ingenious that our anatomy and our physiology is. But you realize, like, the way I explain it to people is, it's like you live in an HOA, okay? You live in a neighborhood, okay? And it's like, over time, so you have this space, and you have these structures in this space, and some of them are suspended by ligaments, and sometimes it's just, you know, you got the fence, and you've got, you know, the yard, and you've got this stuff that takes up space, and then it moves and it shifts from time to time. But over time, you know, it shifts so that, like, you fill up, you know, the uterus with a baby, and that's going to move things over a little bit. You fill up the bladder, that's going to move things over a little bit. You fill up with poo, that's going to move things over a little bit. They sag and shift, but when you take stuff out, then it's like the architecture changes, the neighborhood changes, you know, the riffraff comes in, that kind of thing. But I don't even think that's a complete explanation, because it doesn't even take in account the role of our hormones. And that's where I feel like this year is literally like the year that I'm going to get a much better sense of what estrogen is. Because we're told in, you know, middle school health class that estrogen's what makes us girls and testosterone is what makes boys boys. Hopefully we all know now that we all have estrogen and testosterone. We tend to have a bit more. And those hormones, especially estrogen, there are receptors all over the freaking body. And there's some that locally impact those tissues and play a role in that. And some people's symptoms are cyclic, and it can affect the stiffness and all that kind of stuff. So, like, I don't even know if there's a model that I would love to figure this out, like, that we could simply explain to, I don't know, an elementary school kid when you're trying to educate them about those muscles. Like, it's so utterly complex that, yes, it's an architecture situation. Yes, it's a volume situation, like the neighborhood example. Yes, there's, you know, the hormone component to it, like how stiff are, you know, is your house made of straw or sticks or bricks? Like, where do your genes kind of play a role in all this? And I feel like there's not a good example that's even simple enough for adults, but we need to come up with one that's simple enough for kids, so that when we get moms that are finally having their own kids, and they still have no freaking idea what just happened down there, that they're not completely caught off guard and still stuck with this idea that those organs are sitting in a literal actual hammock, which they are not, by the way. So I don't know, the questions that I have that come out of this that are kind of my focus for this year, one is, like I said, the hormone piece, and where I think this is incredibly relevant and has a lovely crossover in other points in our life, Abby, is that we have very clear times in our life in low estrogen. Immediately postpartum is one of them, and then perimenopause into menopause is another major one. So as I'm kind of doing this, oh, these hounds are so freaking loud. As I'm kind of diving down the rabbit hole into perimenopause and menopause, I'm like, shoot, like, a lot of this stuff really does sound like a lot of postpartum things. So like anything else, I typically will learn something from some other area and then pull it back to areas that I treat. So stay tuned for like the low energy or the lower estrogen aspect of things. I think the other one that plays into this really importantly is there's been a lot of discussion about low energy and a lot of carryover with that too. Same thing, immediately postpartum, breastfeeding moms who are trying to lose weight by under eating and over exercising, same freaking thing in perimenopause and menopause. And that old adage of those of you that grew up in my era where, you know, deprivation over, you know, exercise and you'll lose the weight and then that doesn't actually work out. Like, I feel like some of the advice is going to be very similar if we can get people to understand that we need to, that we need to fuel for our activity, which might include breastfeeding. We need to fuel for our exercise and just our activities of every day. We need to rest and have enough rest and support. And we also need to ensure that we have appropriate levels of estrogen and other hormones to make sure everything is kind of copacetic and happy. So anyway, those are the two areas that I really think, and what's interesting is that's where a lot of literature is going. I don't think it's just my algorithm and that's what I'm paying attention to, but I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of overlap on that stuff this year. So anyway, I would love your thoughts as far as if that's anything that you're interested in. Low estrogen, energy availability. Would love to dive into some conversations in the DMs for sure.